Hello and welcome to the Marketing Meetup podcast. My name's Joe Glover. Thank you so much for listening in today. Today we have a real treat for you. We have Jack Hinchcliffe, who is the CMO of the UK and Ireland team of KFC. Jack is someone I know to be a fabulous leader. In fact, let me share a story. 2 years ago, I was accepted into something called the Marketing Academy. It's a scholarship for young leaders in marketing where they select 30 marketers from around the UK, bring them together and put them through this leadership course. I was really proud to be accepted, but like anyone trying to explain what they do to their parents, then I needed something that would sort of explain to them the gravitas of what happened, how this amazing thing was part of my life. And so I went up to them and I explained what the Marketing Academy was, but the thing I grasped to was, oh yeah, and the marketing director for KFC is going to be there. That man's name was Jack, the Jack that we'll hear from today. But far more than the fancy job title, Jack has something really quite impressive, which is that when I met him, he is someone who has a magnetism where people are drawn to him. He's a thoughtful leader and he's a great, great marketer. He's an individual who's highly impressive and someone one can only aspire to be a little bit more like. I'm a big fan of Jack, and by the end of today's webinar, then there was a lot more Jack fans in the world too. I know that by the end of today, you'll feel the same. Today we're going to be focusing on how KFC turned their brand around, and Jack goes through the story of how it felt at the beginning and what they did about it, and indeed what they did at the end. He included a bunch of visuals which clearly won't be good for this podcast format, but I'm pretty sure that by the end of the podcast you'll have a very good idea of what was been going on. And of course, if you would like to catch up on the video, then you only need to head to the Marketing Meetup website. Before we get going, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors for this episode, who are Hrefs. Hrefs are a wonderful SEO tool. They've been fabulous supporters of the Marketing Meetup for a long time now. And they've just released a new feature that sits within their platform. This new feature is their search engine results page comparison tool. Here you can compare two different keywords over the course of time and compare how they appeared in the search engine results page, which gives you an idea of how your keywords are appearing to folks who are searching for them. It also gives you the option to compare two different keywords and see how they perform differently. It's a really powerful feature. It's brand new, well worth checking out. So do take the time to check out Hrefs. With all that said, now's the time to hand over to the very, very, very wonderful Jack to speak through how KFC turned their brand around. See you soon.
Thank you, Joe. That's very, a very kind and generous introduction. And all of you, thank you for joining and listening. I've got I'm not in my normal location today, so I've got perhaps the dullest background you could ever hope for. There's a thermostat and a light switch, and I've also got ever so slightly shaky connection. So apologize if there are any issues, and Joe will kind of shout out if there are. But let me jump in and kick you off. This is when I think about what might be interesting to chat about for the next 45 minutes, I thought rather than like sort of taking one little thing, I'd actually share like my experiences over the last 8 years at KFC and talk about what I'm calling the brand turnaround story in the last 7 years for us at KFC. So let me share. Okay. So let me start off by saying I'm Jack. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at KFC. And I'm sure most of you know who KFC are, but we're a chicken restaurant brand. We've got 1,000 restaurants in the UK and Ireland. And I'm responsible for those 1,000 restaurants. Now, some of those, the majority of them are owned by franchisees, and we've got 50 equity restaurants that we own, but we look after the whole of the brand. And I want to start by talking about where we were 7 years ago. I'll say as a caveat that this story is one that so many different people across the KFC organization have played such a critical part in. And although I'm here talking about it, I'm naturally talking about lots of people's work, and that's not just the marketing teams. It's not just people who are still in the brand today. It's a whole host of people over that 7-year period. But to put it frankly, 7 years ago, we were seeing a business performance that I describe as mediocre. Now, look, we were still growing in sales, but that growth was beginning to flatten. Most materially, we were seeing market share decline. So the growth that we were delivering was in a growing market, and we were losing share in that growing market. And one of the key drivers in that was that penetration was declining. So what little growth we were delivering through existing customers coming back more frequently, but not to the same levels that the total category was growing in. So although this may not have been an absolute burning platform, there was a need for us to refocus and review where we were and take action. So we started off by asking ourselves why, what was going on? And naturally, as a marketing team, we looked at the biggest lever that we can pull, the thing that we spend most of our time talking about. And we said, we've got a communications challenge. We need to go away and do some diagnosis to understand why our communications aren't delivering the results that we want. And so we kicked off this big piece of research. And the first thing that the research uncovered was that our category, what we call QSR, quick service restaurant, what most normal people out there call fast food, had sort of become public enemy number one. And over probably the 5 years preceding this research, a combination of NGOs, campaigners, government legislation, as well as kind of general consciousness of the public was really shifting. Supersize Me and Jamie Oliver were just two of the kind of key examples of how public perception of the category of QSR had really, really shifted in the 5 years prior. In addition, frankly, nobody was feeling great about fast food. We did in this research, we did a lot of metaphorics and qual research with consumers to understand how they see the category. And many of them described the fast food planet as this dying planet, the sort of planet that Wall-E's from. In fact, 3 individuals specifically commented on fast food being this Wall-E planet that's full of junk, that's dying, that's brown. And then they described the planet of food culture today. And the planet of food culture today was green and lush and vibrant. They said it's like California with rivers flowing through, green land, and people spontaneously breaking into yoga poses. Kind of a huge discrepancy between the fast food planet they described and actually the food culture. And then the competition had really kind of geared up, and where historically QSR was really just about a small subset of brands, the category had expanded massively. So coffee shops had really kind of come up and made a significant impact. Grocery had significantly improved their offer when it comes to grab and go. And then fast casual and casual dining had really got the value equation right with more offers, promotions. So if I think about fast food, it's basically predicated on three things. It's fast, it's affordable, and it tastes good. Suddenly there's a whole load more who maybe previously hadn't been fast, who were much faster, or who previously hadn't been affordable, who are now much more affordable, or previously where food quality or taste hadn't been there, who are now delivering great taste. So we were operating in a far broader, more expanded category too. And then we looked at the KFC brand, and this is where it got really tough to hear, because we asked our customers to describe KFC as if we were a person. And there were some different things that kind of came to light, but on the whole, people described an old man who was behind the times and losing touch. And they said, maybe he used to be cool. In fact, one person said, KFC, maybe he used to be a musician and he was cool and he was hip and he was like the sort of person you'd want to hang out with. But now he's an old man, he's out of date, and he lives alone at home by himself, and he just can't keep up. So they were telling us that this legendary brand had just lost relevance. And then in very practical terms, we were able to unpick some very, very specific anxieties that customers held about the brand. So firstly, that was a fear and a shame that was all around being associated with chickens that they thought were abused. So it was very much about chickens and some deeply held, not necessarily rational beliefs about chicken welfare. The second was about brand modernity. So fear of not being a modern person because KFC was a brand of the past. And then third was all around this kind of uncaring, faceless corporate machine of the KFC brand. So this was our diagnosis, and we called it the 4 C's, actually 3 C's and a B. But we looked at the category, which, as I said, was an expanded and redefined category. We looked at the consumer, who had higher expectations and higher demands of brands in this space, that Californian green lush planet. We looked at culture, and actually the fact that fast food was off the cultural code. And then we looked at the brand, and we saw that we had a brand that was heading towards a place of irrelevance. And so, like, in a nutshell, what this was telling us was that KFC is no longer relevant to culture. And so this initial hypothesis we had going into the diagnosis that we had a communications challenge was, in fact, that we had a relevance challenge. So we set a new destination, and we used visuals and metaphor to tell that story internally to our restaurant teams and to our agencies. And we said that we need to rocket from this dying planet fast food, where we live today, and we need to get to this new destination, this new planet, which is planet fast good. And these consumers told us who lived on planet fast good, and it was all the kind of like new, modern, contemporary, relevant restaurant brands, everything from Five Guys to Leon, to GBK to Wagamama, like all of these kind of combination of QSR brands, as well as fast casual, as well as casual dining. And then on Planet Fast Food, really, there was only a few of us, but KFC was firmly there. But what was shocking and what was the burning platform for us really was that McDonald's, our core competitor, they had moved to Planet Fast Good. So here are just some sort of strategic themes that we pulled through that, and it was a big piece of research, but also a very an opportunity where we needed to face into the mirror as a team, as an organization, in order to kind of face into hard truths and make change. So some of the themes, some of the learnings, I'd say firstly was around defining reality. We use this 4C tool, and being able to face into the truths that we knew to be there, but that were tough to hear. That was a really important part of it. The second piece was how we use metaphor and storytelling. So to be able to paint this picture of this fading old man, the musician who'd lost relevance, or the planets, the dying planet and Wall-E, that metaphor really helped us conjure a very visceral visual image of where we needed to go. We created an enemy, something that we wanted to push from, and that was the codes of fast food. And so this became a really helpful tool for us in making decisions over the next few years, because we said, is that something that old fast food would do? And frankly, everything that felt like it was fast food, we pivoted from and we did something different. And then we created a destination. So it wasn't just about where we were moving away from, it was about where we were moving towards. And that was a modern, in touch with culture, fast, good planet. And finally, as I mentioned there at the end, the burning platform was that McDonald's had already arrived, and that created a sense of urgency for us to make the change that we wanted to fast. So the first kind of like bit of this story I'd kind of package up here is the diagnosis. It all started with diagnosis. And actually the question that we asked at the beginning, we got a different answer to that we were expecting. We thought we needed a new commerce platform. We thought we needed to be more distinctive and relevant in communications only. But actually what we learned was that KFC as a brand had a relevance issue. However, we also had a communications challenge. And so the first lever that we could pull was to work on our communications. And so we ran a pitch process, and a huge part of our journey in changing communications and making KFC a more relevant, distinctive, and easier to run to access in the UK was the work that we ended up and have been doing over the last 6 years with Mother London. And so I would point to that. I would point to that as absolutely critical first step. And they created a new brand world for us. And we call this world the New South. Now, let me tell you, this was the mood board that Mother created as part of the pitch process. And I'll show you some of the work through the rest of this presentation. And although naturally as a mood board, this looks quite different in some stylistic elements, what we actually have delivered over the last 6 years is really close to this in spirit and in soul. But this was so different to where the brand had been at that point. So this felt like truly transformative, truly different to where we were. But also, it was also absolutely who we were and who we knew we could be. So this sense of ambition that was built into the brand world, as well as being authentic to who we were, was what really resonated with us as a team, and then also with the with our viewers and audience. A big part of that was food photography, and we've spent lots of time. This is actually from work we created over the first couple of years, but we really sought to redefine how food showed up within fast food. 7 years ago for us, it was very much like the perfect photoshopped images of buckets, no crumbs in sight, white clear backgrounds, and we brought just an authenticness, messiness and realness to our food photography, so it's there ready to eat. And we placed it in natural organic backgrounds so that it looked like it's on a table ready to pick up. And we tried to make that really distinctive by using a lot of top-down photography, which now lots and lots of brands are using. But we really did, when we launched this, do something that was quite different to the rest of the category. But now I want to share a little bit of fun in terms of the creative journey that we've been on, and share some of the work as well. So some creative themes, the first being to trust the obvious. Now, I said that one of the biggest anxieties that our consumers had was that KFC wasn't real food. They didn't think our chickens were even real. So this anxiety around abused chicken, it flowed through into these ideas of mutant chicken, of kind of battery caged chicken, frankly, myths about our food. And one of the reasons that we felt people might be saying that was because we never, ever talked about our chickens, and we never showed a chicken. So the first piece of work we did with Mother London broke that down, and we shared chicken. Now, I don't know if I've got sound, so Joe, you give me a thumbs down if there's no sound, okay? I can see you. Very happy to see you dancing to that as well, Joe. The second kind of challenge that we had to kind of face into was that we use lots of fresh ingredients in our restaurants. We hand bread our chicken, but no one knows that. It's one of the reasons why KFC tastes so great, because we have fresh chicken come into our restaurant every day. It's hand breaded and served within a very limited time period, so that it's really the best quality it can be. And over the years, we've spent lots of time showing cooks in our restaurant hand breading chicken, tapping it together. We have this thing called like the flour burst, when you tap together 2 drums of chicken and the flour bursts out, and still no one could play that back to us, and actually no one cared. So we wanted to talk about our superiority, but do so in a different way. And in order to do that, we launched this campaign, which was all about leaning into the obvious of these chicken shops that exist all over the UK, that are frankly looking to offer an alternative, but perhaps not as good a quality as KFC. So this was a piece of out of home that we called A to Z, where we brought some human wit and charm to say flattery is the imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and said, guys, we're flattered. And then we also produced a TV spot that we linked into this, with the Colonel going through the city streets, going past all of the imitators, which we called Chicken Town. So that's interesting, the obvious. The next one I'm calling kind of having some courage to call it as it is. And we had one of the biggest challenges in terms of overall satisfaction, which was that nobody liked our fries. At the time, I was the innovation director. I was responsible for our food. So I kicked off this big project to change our fries. And I was super proud of it. We did loads of research. We did loads of work. We knew that we were moving to this better, more authentic, skin on, thicker fry. It held its temperature better. It tasted more potatoey. It was delicious. We put it into test, and in sort of outside of restaurant, it performed exceptionally well. But then when we put it into restaurant, our customers told us that they were missing the old fries. People are strange and difficult and complicated beasts, but really what it was that they weren't expect, like, people go to KFC because they know what they're going to get. And when they get something different, when it's not sort of the familiar, there's some uncertainty. So we actually needed to create a campaign, but we didn't have any time and we didn't have any budget. So we needed people to be aware that the fries had changed, but do so with very limited time and resource. So what we decided to do was lean into the fact that we were changing something that everyone hated, and use some social proofing and use some loss aversion heuristics to play around with that, but do so in a very creative way. So I've got a short video to tell. In that work, we actually started putting paid promotions behind negative tweets of our fries, and we managed to trend on Twitter, and in BBC News we topped a Donald Trump story, all through very, very small level of investment, just by kind of calling out the issue as our customers knew it to be the case. Another example, probably a more famous example, was when we ran out of chicken a few years ago. Now, this was back in 2018. The reality is we actually had a major supply chain failure, and rather than just running out of chicken, we ran out of lots of things. For us, this was a genuine business crisis. We had, we were in a pretty challenging situation, as were our franchisees. It happened. It was a crisis that had flared up overnight. There was a lot of attention on the business, both globally. We needed to do the right thing to support our people, and there was very, very real risk that some of our partners, whether it be suppliers, franchisees, could go out of business. People could lose their jobs. This was a real human issue for us, and those of us who were facing into the eye of the storm, this was intense, and we were trying to problem solve it. But at the same time, for the general public, this was just a silly story on a slow news day. It was the and finally a few days in a row on national news, and the story was KFC, the chicken shop that's run out of chicken. And so whilst we were managing what was a very real business crisis, an opportunity also presented it to ourselves to manage the expression of this and take control of that narrative in the media by apologizing. And we did this press ad, which we call the FCK bucket, where we apologized. And a big part of this was to have the courage to own in, face into this. And big conversations about accepting liability were going on with our legal team around this apology, because we were right in the midst of some of the challenges with our distribution partner. But what resonated about this, and why I think this was such a successful piece of work, was just the human tone that came through. And we knew that we had that third anxiety about a faceless corporate machine. And the work that we were doing at this point was anything but faceless and corporate. This was just a very, very human response to a business crisis. And the first line that I don't think you can really read on there was, "A chicken shop without any chicken, it's not ideal," which again is just a very human tone that we kind of brought into the work. Next, all about staying agile. So remaining relevant in culture has got to trump our campaign planning. And so in February 2019, we launched a brand new campaign, a big piece of brand work, all designed to put meaning back into our tagline, "It's finger licking good." This was the out of home. And as I say, this campaign launched in February 2019, sorry, February 2020, just before we went into lockdown. We had a huge tube buy with this work, and we had a piece of film. And what we had to decide to do after running what had been a huge investment, a big piece of work that we were all very emotionally attached to, is 2 weeks after this went live, we pulled everything associated with it because it just wasn't the right time to be showing people licking their fingers. And so I would just like to take the opportunity to show the film to you, 170 people, because so few people actually ever got to see it. So this is my opportunity to actually show the work that no one saw. It really was the wrong time to be showing people licking their fingers. So to move on, but stay in the same theme, like it's rarely a good idea to be doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. I think that one of the things that we need to do as marketers is make sure that we can that we get noticed and that we get the brands noticed, rather than just kind of blending into a sea of sameness. That's what being distinctive is all about. And I think one time when that was really prevalent in our sense was is when kind of COVID hit, and advertisers were being incredibly solemn in the messages, and appropriately so. But when we reopened our delivery channels after we'd closed for COVID, whilst everyone else was being incredibly solemn, we wanted to bring the banjo. And that was actually our brief was, well, everyone else is playing the violin. how do we bring the banjo? And we created a few pieces of work to announce our reopening, and this was our company. Content of people really trying to recreate KFC at home, and put that on air to announce our reopening. And we also temporarily paused our tagline, "It's finger licking good," through pixelation. We also then introduced temporary taglines. We allowed our fans to participate and come up with suggestions. And then we even hijacked other brands' taglines for a temporary period. In a distinctive way. So some creative themes. As I say on this slide, they are absolutely unashamedly shared retrospectively with the benefit of hindsight. It wasn't the plan necessarily, but I do think that we chose to trust in the obvious answer. No one believed that we were selling real chicken. Perhaps that's because we'd never shown a real chicken. We, at times had courage to actually face into the truth. And I think that, if we're to be courageous, like in life, in any profession, that fear is a very necessary part of that. It's not about blindly going in with kind of with naivety, but recognizing and knowing the risks. That's what takes courage. And the then CMO of the FCK bucket, Meg Farron, along with the mother team, took some real risks when they ran that, and that wasn't without fear. Next is about not following the crowd. We chose to bring the banjo when everyone else was playing the violin, and that also presents a little bit of a risk as well, because it's very easy to do what everyone else is doing, to get on the same bandwagon, to comment on the same things, engage in the same conversations. And then finally, being open to change the plan. I think that everyone on this call is going to have lots of experience in having to act in much more agile ways over the last few years, and remaining relevant in culture is always going to trump the plan that you have in your brand plan. And so just before I wrap up, a few things in terms of how we got there. This is all work that we created with Mother over the last 6 years. As I say, it looks a little bit different to that mood board that we developed 6-7 years ago, but the tone's absolutely there. And just three building blocks for success in a client agency partnership, because I truly believe that the Mother team and the KFC team are as one, and that we are only as good as the work that we create together. And that's built on trust, and recognizing that the great work the team at Mother does, because we have to empower them and trust them to push us in directions we might not have taken ourselves. We need to have courage together, and actually trust in our gut instinct, as well as data. And then finally, partnership. Partnership is really, really important, so that we collaborate at all levels. But this wasn't just a communications task. This was a business transformation. So I'll just take three or 4 minutes to talk about some of the broader context, and then I'll open up and open up to any questions. So the first one is that in building more confidence and pride in the brand through communications, we were able to really translate that into confidence and pride for our teams. Just an example of that is how we brought that to life in some of our big restaurant manager conferences, where we had gospel choirs on stage with pyrotechnics and giant chickens, and that sense of this real kind of like energetic, modern, soulful brand. We converted a conference center to Chicken Town, and we used that campaign idea to motivate all of our restaurant managers around the superior food that they create in their restaurants. We built the confidence to actually tackle some of the big issues. And one of the things that we're most proud of is how we were able to do that in making change in chicken welfare. So we faced into some of the real challenges that we had, and we engaged for the first time with some of the big NGO groups. So we actually started to listen, and in listening like wholeheartedly, we were able to make change. And a big part of that change was about being more transparent, first and foremost, in engaging with the issues. But then in making practical, real changes. We were one of the first signatories on the Better Chicken Commitment, first in our sector. And then we were able to start telling that story and talking about chicken more actively. We were actually awarded top in the pecking order by World Animal Protection for the progress that we'd made in this space. And just 4 years ago, World Animal Protection were actually pushing and protesting and pushing against KFC. So a huge turnaround through listening and partnership, but then making meaningful change. And then we transformed the restaurant environment as well. Frankly, the experience that you have in a KFC is so much more important than the communications that we deliver. It is the restaurant environment, the experience, the food quality, the service experience, the cleanliness of the restaurant, all of those things that make the biggest difference. And frankly, this is one of the areas where we're still really working on it. We've done made a huge shift in terms of the design and the aesthetic and the quality of the restaurant, but we know that we've still got a lot of work to do when it comes to the experience we deliver to our guests every day in the restaurant physically. And that's going to be the big next leap forward that we're making. So just a few results now, sort of flowing forward 7 years. Just for those people who really believe in, who need to see the data and the facts, I've got the data. So in YouGov quality scores, from a stagnant performance in 2015, 2016, we've consistently seen improvements in terms of overall quality. When it comes to value for money and value perceptions, we've seen the same progress. Our advertising is also more impactful. So we've seen a significant lift in terms of overall ad awareness, and also recognition has significantly increased as well. We've moved to a positive brand impression. So when we take total brand impression from YouGov, move from a considerably negative view to positive. That was the first time in 2020. And then finally, we've delivered really strong sales results as well. So that's the KFC story. I feel like I've smashed my timings because I've finished with 15 minutes to spare. I'll stop sharing and I'll open that up for any questions or just having a conversation around any of that. So, Joe, are you facilitating that?
Yeah, I'll do that. But okay. Honestly, I don't know whether you would have been able to see the chat going through as you were speaking, Jack. But folks have got so much from this presentation. The people saying it was their favorite meetup ever, clear presentation, everything you'd ever want to hear. So I'm sending you this chat file straight afterwards, and I put in the chat that it's an on-tap ego boost because right there you've got a lot of folks who are even saying they're getting KFC tonight. So I think you've done your job. Let me take the questions. There's a bunch of open ones, and for anyone watching in, if you see a question that you like in the Q&A, do give it a thumbs up because then we can prioritize them, because we've got 12 open questions and 14 minutes. So I suspect that we won't get through every one of them. So let's kick off with Simon. So Simon, that's a great question, and it's one that was sort of mirrored in the chat as well, which is, as this was a business transformation, how, as a marketing team, did you work with the rest of the board to convince them of the route ahead? So marketing convincing the board.
That is a great question. And it's one that, you know, like I get asked a lot in different sort of forms, which is, you know, sometimes it's about like, how did you convince the business to change, like, or whatever it was. And honestly, the answer, unfortunately, isn't one where like that's necessarily something that can be picked up. But the truth is that the business wanted to change, the board wanted to change, that there was an open door. I think that, but I'll tell you a little bit about like why I think that is. So firstly is that we were able to identify a real need to change. Now, what direction that needed to go in, and that wasn't based on like a desire to do different creative, to put the branding culture. It was very clearly, it was about market share, it was about sales, it was about performance. And this all started from a how do we transform performance. So being rooted in the numbers and the commercials, that's a really, really big part of it. The second piece was that the diagnosis that we did was so compelling. It was really thorough. It was really easy to understand. And it also was presented in such a way that that chimed and resonated with lots of different personality types. So there was metaphor, there was storytelling, but there was also lots of quant data attached to all of that as well. So there was this real wealth of data to unpick. And then the other big bit I'd say was that this idea that McDonald's had already transformed their business, and we knew that and we could see that, but we hadn't been able to codify it. This gave us a framework to codify that. And we called that the fast good code. And as well as the metaphor, beneath that, there were some real clear things that we had to do in order to have that change. But the big one was we need to be fast, convenient, fast and convenient, and easy to access. We needed to be affordable to get value right, and we needed to be, and we need to taste good. But we also needed to be good. And that idea of being good wasn't about like banging a drum on nutrition or banging a drum on welfare, although those things were important, but it was just about being a modern, relevant brand. And the data set out there in the world, as well as from the research, was really, really compelling. So when I take those things together, I think that was a big part of it. But if I could just leave you with one other lesson, which is probably my greatest personal learning from this, is that we stuck to the same strategy for 7 years, and we were consistent and committed to sticking to the same strategy. And there was a lot of personnel change way, but we stayed committed. I think that the success was through committing to and delivering one strategy like over time.
Amazing. I love that. And how, so personal question is that like I struggle with this. So Mark Ritson last week published an article which was basically in marketing. I don't know whether you had the chance to see it, but in effect it was sort of saying like attention marketing is probably actually more important than like you know, big brand codes and whatever it may be. And he was using the example of the Daniel Craig advert that some folks may have seen recently, which was effectively just Daniel Craig dancing, but it was great. You know, it was a really, really great advert. And like, I struggle with this personally because I always strive for like substance and consistency and brand like that. But at what point do you just strive for attention and sort of being part of the public salience? Like, was there ever a moment where you diverted from like the consistency bit and just went, actually, stuff it, we just need to be part of the cultural picture here? Or was it always, you know, like, nah, you know, like, you know, we're gonna be us and us to the end type of thing?
Well, I'm going to have my cake and eat it, Joe, because I think that it's all important. And the way I always think about it is that first and foremost, you need to get attention, because if you're not noticed, none of the other stuff matters. So top of the funnel, you need attention. And the next thing is that what's attention worth if no one knows that it's you? So everyone might love a piece of advertising and talk around it, but it needs to be attributed to the brand. So attention sits first and foremost. If you like, you need to stand out, and that needs to be relevant to culture. But then people need to know it's you. So attention is that kind of Daniel Craig dancing, But if no one knows what that's for, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But actually, what's that worth? And so that's where brand codes become really important. And I think that you can absolutely do both of those things.
Nice.
But once you've got the brand codes, there's a message comprehension, and that's where I say there is a thread of relevance that becomes important, because there has to be something that you're saying that is congruent to the category. And so when I think about that, say the strutting chicken, the first piece of communication that I showed, it was the most complained about ad of the year, by the way. People didn't like it. And actually, Mark Ritson wrote an article that said that campaign was a mistake. And he may or may not have been wrong. I don't know. I mostly agree with what Mark says, so he may or may not have been wrong on that. But the idea there was that we needed people to understand that KFC serves real chicken. So the message was incredibly important. And if you don't have congruence, attention and attribution is nothing as well. And I think it's absolutely possible to do all three. I think it becomes vanity if you just do attention. But if you just do distinctiveness, frankly, you're not going to respond to culture. It might work in short term, but it's not going to deliver for the long term. And I think what we really got right, or when we got it right, what we really got right was something that was entertaining, attention grabbing, relevant for culture, and then recognizably and distinctively KFC. And sometimes that was because we used distinctive brand codes, and we're very fortunate. I'm not a genius marketeer when it comes to brand codes. I've inherited some of the best brand codes in the world, and creating them is much harder. But it is my responsibility to continue to build them and to continue to invest in them, because you can leverage brand codes and you can build brand codes. And if you just leverage over time, very quickly within a CMO's tenure of 5 years or so, you can have lost equity for them as well. So you need to do both of those things.
Shoot, dude. Perfect answer. Thank you. I love that. I need to make sure we're going back into the Q&A from the community, because they're the most important people. My curiosity got the better of me there. So we've got a question from Naomi that's presently sat top, and it's a continuation of the first question that we asked about the buy-in from the board. So Naomi asks, how did you get buy-in from franchisees when the route you were taking was bolder than those in the rest of the industry? Was it the same answer, or was it a slight variant?
I think the big part is it was taking franchisees with us on the journey and collaborating with them. So this wasn't done to them. This was something that we all did together. And there were some really bold steps involved in that. And rather than us making those decisions and then take them to the franchisees, we made the decisions together. And we never forced anything through into our franchisees, but we all share exactly the same ambitions. We all want to grow transactions, profitable transactions. So my objectives are the same objectives of our franchisees. We may look at it from different angles. And so the power came when we brought them together. And I'll just give you one example of that. It's our franchisees love Mother. They know who our advertising, they don't just know who our advertising agency are. They know the people at the advertising agency. Mother came to our board meetings, and they didn't just come to present creative. In fact, they rarely present the creative. My team would present that. They came and they listened, and they engaged with franchisees, and they talk about the things that are important to them. And so it became a decision process, not one made by committee, but one that everyone had a voice within: franchisees, agencies, marketing team, and the rest of the board as well.
Dude. We can see a couple of comments coming in here. Same one from Ian, who says he's pretty good, isn't he? He could be the CMO of a big brand one day. And then we've got Joe, who's sort of saying he's brilliant. Can see why he got the job. So I think you got some fans here, mate. Let's take the next one from the very lovely Berenice, who asks about your journey, actually. And Berenice says that you mentioned being an innovation manager previously. So how did you end up transitioning into a marketing role?
I sometimes feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world, because I love KFC as well. So not only do I get to be CMO, I get to be CMO of a brand and a business that I absolutely love. So I'm going to try and give a quick answer, because I know we've not got tons of time. We want to get a couple more in. But firstly, I started my career in sales. And I spent the first 6 or 7 years of my career in sales. I then had this sort of sliding doors opportunity to move into marketing. And I did it thinking it'd be short term, but I found my love and my passion. But I entered into marketing at a relatively senior middle management position before I then ended up joining KFC. So I went from being like a salesperson straight into an SBM role, like running a small team and a brand, having never done marketing before. And somebody took a punt on me, and I'm ever grateful for that opportunity. I then joined KFC and I essentially joined KFC as an innovation manager, and then became innovation director in less than a year. And I'd never done innovation before. And again, someone took a punt on me and gave me an opportunity. And then, I share this with this group. I don't say this often, but I then became marketing director. And I think I'd only ever made 3 campaigns in my life. 3 above the line campaigns. I'd done some of the bits and pieces, but we make a lot of work at KFC. So I didn't have this huge kind of wealth of experience having done it, but I had the opportunity to do that. And now that I'm CMO, I kind of feel like maybe I've done marketing, maybe I can tick the box, but I felt like a bit of an imposter for a period through that. But what I would say is that I think that it is the things that are the non-traditional experiences, the diversity of our experience, that makes us better in role. And I would say that I was better as a marketeer because I hadn't spent my whole career as a marketeer. I brought something different because I'd been a salesperson. I was better in innovation than I would otherwise have been because I had these different experiences. And I was better as marketing director because I could bring something fresh, and then I trust the people who've got loads of experience and are brilliant at it to do the work, and I'm not going to be able to do that. And so that naivety, I think, was a benefit. And I'd say that I think that marketeers, CMOs, in fact, no matter what industry you're in, should come in all different shapes and sizes. It shouldn't be a linear path. I am so fortunate to have had people who backed me and had the opportunity to work somewhere like KFC that's done that, frankly, because not everywhere's like that. But I seek to pay that forward. I really do believe that that a lot of what we do can be learned, can be developed on the job. And the diversity of thinking is actually one of the most underrated parts, because if we all have got the same experiences and the same background, we won't bring that diversity of thought in.
Incredible. Mate, bang on, absolutely bang on. What a rallying cry. In theory, we've got 1 minute left, and there's such a great question left at the top, but have you got a meeting next? Have you got at 2 o'clock? So
I give you until 5 past.
Okay. Okay, we've got Susie with the last question. So Susie asks, I really love how you used user-generated content in your campaigns. Any tips on how SMEs can engage with user-generated content? But I really love what Susie's put at the end here, which is especially negative comments, and just speaking about how you perceive negativity and negativity in user-generated content would be generally super useful.
I think one of the big things that's been really important for us, because we weren't able to do that from day one. It came over time, but it's about being truly authentic. And I think that it's an overused word, but I think that you have to really look yourself in the mirror and go understand how your brand behaves. Now that's going to be different in social channels than it might be in above the line. But you're still the same, the character remains the same, so showing different sides of it through different channels. But if you start with that authenticity, it allows you to engage on a much more human level. I'm not saying that's human to human, as in admin to consumer, but as a brand coming across on a much more human level. And if I think about the piece of work that I showed, that was born of a social campaign that we had run called Rate My KFC, where we invited people to send in their homemade KFC during lockdown, and then we would rate it. And our Twitter admin, he just ran that himself, and he had full empowerment to rate it. And he wrote some scathing things to our customers, some things that, frankly, if they'd come to me, I'm not sure I would have approved. But the beauty of it is we don't have an approval process, so we trust in our social team to run that without an approval process, except for politics, and like there are a couple of things that do have to get approved, but that allowed for a much more like human and organic piece, and that generated much more content, and then we were able to leverage and use that content. And I think that if you've got a tone of voice, a point of view, and a perspective that is authentic, it allows you to deal with negativity in a different way. So we would we were being human. Like our fries were crap. We were saying that internally, our customers were saying it, and so we decided to change them. And so it was always like not having any fear to actually acknowledge the fact that the reason we're changing them was because you've told us that they're crap. And so like that kind of becomes a much more, I think, just much more human conversation.
That's awesome, dude. That's really brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that I found that really empowering, and actually, something that maybe I've struggled with a lot of the time is that consistency of putting out a voice into the world that feels consistent, but then not embracing the wholeness of humanity almost. So actually by saying, yeah, we want to put out a great image, but here's the rubbish, and that's how we make it good. Brilliant. Really, really brilliant. Mate, you said 5 past. Let's call it quits at 3 past. Thank you so much. And thank you as well to the absolutely phenomenal community as well for chiming in and creating such a wonderful atmosphere as well today. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Jack. If I could ask one favor of everyone watching in today, please do thank our sponsors. It makes the world a difference. If you enjoyed today, we'll see you next Tuesday. Jack, legend. Speak soon, mate. Thank you very much. Cheers.